it's not a disability. It's a difference in how you learn, how you take in information.
So that's another discouraging thing, that if the student might be struggling, with learning, but they don't have a diagnosis, they cannot get the proper accommodation because they don't have the diagnosis.
With technology, with social media, with everything else that's going out there, there's so many additional distractions that you can spend so much time doom scrolling, which is a fun pastime. But the thing is that that's really, really enticing and engaging for folks that have inattention, because everything is short, everything is quick. You get your quick fix, boom, move on to the next one, move on to the next one, move on. And it's a never-ending stream of stimuli. And the problem is, how do you break that whenever your brain is already wired in that way?
The more I have looked at differences in my students, the more convinced I am that it's the majority of us who are the so-called neurodivergent brains.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Luchs, and I am one of our speakers today. With me today are several other folks, and we'll go ahead and have everyone introduce themselves. I am a Dean of Instruction at the Community College of Denver.
I am Angelica McMillan, and I am faculty of Humanities and Fine Arts, and I'm also the instructional coach at the Westminster campus.
I am Diana Montealegre, instructional designer for CU Boulder and Front Range Community College and Web Digital Accessibility.
And I am Brandon Poulliot. I am an instructional designer and technologist at the University of Colorado Springs.
Well, I'm Greg Wells. I'm a senior instructional designer at Colorado State University.
Welcome. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm Mouse. I'll throw myself in there. I'm on the instructional design team here at Front Range Community College.
Welcome. So before we get started on today's topic, we wanted to give everyone a sort of a quick working definition. These are grabbed from various governmental websites and health websites, and then we will have we'll kick into some guiding questions to sort of work on our discussion, and sort of as we move through our discussion later on. So first one is, looks like it jumped ahead a little bit. So attention deficit disorder, a hyperactivity disorder. So attention deficit, ADHD. It's an ongoing pattern of the following pieces, and I won't try to bore you all with reading it, but basically it falls into three different categories. It is inattention, it is hyperactivity, and it is impulsivity. And really, one of the things it all has in common is that it affects executive function. Is really when you think about ADHD and this type of category that's there. They are frequent. They occur across multiple situations. That means it happens at school, at home, at work, with family, with friends, regardless of the situation. It happens. And individuals can have one focus, the lucky ones. It can be multiple combinations of all three categories. You could be a winner. You could win the lotto and get them all. Woohoo! And the other thing that's very common with ADHD is it's also usually found in conjunction with additional learning challenges or learning disabilities. So it's one of those things, and it's interesting because it is always a fun exploration when you go through the various assessments to sort of, they're trying to figure out which category do you fall in, as well as what other things might also be there. To give you an idea of the number of folks, it affects approximately 15.5 million U.S. adults, or 1 in 16. And it also affects 7 million children between the ages of 3 and 17, or 11.4%, of who have been diagnosed. So that's something else. Not not everyone who has ADHD follows through and talks with their healthcare provider, which is usually where you end up with, and starts working with professionals to sort of figure out what's going on. Roughly, what you start seeing about 25% of folks feel that they are. In a recent survey by the National Institute for Mental Health, they found that 25% of adults felt that they had some symptom of ADHD. However, only 13% of those who said that 25%, so we're playing with statistics now, so 13% of 25% actually followed through and talked to their provider to follow up and say, hey, these are my concerns. Do I actually have this or not? And so there's a lot of folks who are undiagnosed that have it. Other thing that shows up a lot is ADD, or attention deficit disorder. It was a separate diagnosis initially, but however, in 1994, the medical community moved it all under the auspices of ADHD, and it's an inattentive disorder, a presentation of ADHD. So when someone says ADD or ADHD, usually they're talking about the same thing. However, prior to 1994, they were considered two separate issues. And the last one we'll talk about is neurodiversity. So neurodiversity arose from Judy Singer's 1998 honors thesis. Judy Singer is an individual with autism. She's also an advocate for autism, as well as other what she determines as what she calls neurodiverse individuals. The focus was to shift the discussion away from being deficit and ableist driven. Like we read those medical definitions. It was they're comparing it to the usual individual or to a normal range. I'm sure we'll have some conversations about, is there actually a normal? But the thing is that it was typically in the past, especially with medical focus, is really on the deficit being compared to those without the disorder. And really with Dr. Singer's focus was to really look at how do we go ahead and move this to more of a socio-political ideation, where we can activate these folks to go ahead and lobby and advocate and really look at how do we move in that area. And so that's really sort of where neurodiversity popped up. And so how Singer and others have defined neurodiversity is individual variances in brain function or behavioral traits as part of the overall variation within a population. So it's more of a statistical definition. And the term applies to many neurological conditions such as autism, attention deficit disorder, Tourette's, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, all the aphias, and also obsessive compulsive disorder. And also, a lot of people don't realize this, but traumatic brain injury also will fall under neurodiverse. So these are all things that sort of fall under the spectrum. And you can see that the goal of this definition is to help create a population of individuals that can then help pursue action to help this community. So that's really sort of where Singer's intention was. And so it's sort of where that neurodiverse movement went to. So we'll go ahead and go into our first guiding question, which is, what are your experiences with ADHD, ADD, or neurodiversity?
Sure, I can go ahead and jump in, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about executive functioning. We said that ADD or ADHD are executive functioning disorders, and so executive function refers to skills that you use to manage everyday tasks like making plans, solving problems, and adapting to new situations. The three main skills are working memory, cognitive flexibility, and inhibition control. These skills develop during your lifetime, often declining as you get older, but there are ways to keep and improve them. So I took that definition from the Cleveland Clinic just to kind of put out there part of my experiences. So I am diagnosed ADHD as well as ASD level 1. And I think a lot of my struggles throughout schooling, whether that be K-12 or post-secondary, definitely refer to things like cognitive flexibility, things like interrupting people, even learning a little bit differently throughout college. I remember asking, we'll say, too many questions, just because I started to realize that I understood things differently, and learned a little bit differently as well. I think one of the best examples of that was starting to learn trigonometry. I kept asking questions, and eventually my instructor got very mad that I kept asking questions and just said, well, it's just because that's the way it is. And I still didn't understand. And to this day, I still struggle with trigonometry. So that I think is one little, kind of snippet of my experiences. But I definitely am on the attention deficit side of things, where, I have things that I can hyper focus on, which is kind of the ASD portion of it. But the attention deficit is having issues with staying on task is a big one. Switching tasks is huge. If there's a plan in place and somebody throws, something, a wrench in the gears, I always compare it to, it's like throwing a penny on my train tracks, whereas normally the train just runs over it. That causes me to derail completely. And so I ask for a little bit of flexibility from friends and family on that front.
Thank you, Brandon. Who would like to go next?
I can jump in. I am diagnosed with ADHD as well, and dyslexia and dysgraphia, and I have a brain injury from, I already forgot, 2021, I think. I'm actually a stroke survivor. So all that combined has caused me quite a lot of issues. I didn't notice them as much before my brain injury. I think my brain injury actually caused them to triple, to be honest. But growing up, one of my issues was definitely attention. I don't have the hyperactivity as much, but I do have the attention issue. I'm constantly interrupting people. Because my brain is going too fast. And the way that my brain works is that if it's going too fast, it's going to jump into something else soon. So I have to get out what I have in my brain right now. So I will definitely, cut people off because I need to say it now because I know that I will jump in 3 seconds to something totally different. The other thing that I have problems with is daydreaming. I will be in a conversation and my brain will just go somewhere else. And I will come and I'm making eye contact with you and I'll come back to you like if I'm paying attention to you when I'm totally not paying attention to you. So that was definitely a struggle in school. The instructor could be talking and explaining things and I will be making totally focused eye contact, but my mind was not there. The constant questions as well. It was, even though they were explaining it, I was not understanding it quite clearly. So I had to ask the same question constantly over and over again. And now as a mother of a child with ADHD and a long range of learning disabilities, that's another challenge because when I'm arguing with him, it's hilarious. I'm sorry. It's totally hilarious. He is going off a tangent while I'm going off a tangent as well. So that has been a struggle as well. So that's my experience with ADHD, neurodiversity, and other learning disabilities.
Yeah, and I've been faculty now at Front Range for 28 years. I have taught humanities classes, but I've also had the opportunity to teach Spanish classes, and those are two very different types of learning skills. And I have definitely seen a variety of different learning styles. I think one thing I've learned is people like the labels ADHD, ADD, and they are helpful to a certain extent, but they don't completely define the person. There's always more to it than just that one label. I have family members, I have friends, and even though I'm not diagnosed, I'm pretty sure anyone who knows me knows that I can hyper focus. And just like Brandon, when I'm interrupted, I was definitely identifying with what you were saying. I don't always react well to an interruption. And I've learned to mask that annoyance. And not upset anyone because it's not their fault that my brain works the way it does. Although I do feel like I get a lot of grace from people who know me and love me, but it's still not easy. With that said, the more I have looked at differences in my students, the more convinced I am that it's the majority of us who are the so-called neurodivergent brains. And I would guess that if more people self-reported or accepted, it would probably be, the numbers would be staggering. And then that doesn't even take into account, for example, when you have depression or anxiety, which magnifies all of those issues and can actually make them worse. So I really think that just in my experience teaching, I've seen not necessarily, I am convinced the numbers weren't always as low as we would have liked to believe. It's becoming more accepted and we have more resources and hopefully more understanding. And we want to make sure, at least in our environment, that we would that we're here to help our students. And I just saw Brandon put in the chat spontaneous. You just keep giving me words because you and I can just identify. Definitely. I'm a very spontaneous person. I sometimes will shock my husband and he will try and get me to stop, but it's usually too late. I'm all in. So yeah, I mean, and the more we talk, the better it is because we start to see the similarities.
Yeah, I put it in a chat, but also I think, to Angelica's point, being at the community college level, we also see a large number of our students that struggle at traditional education coming into the community college as well. So that also might be another reason why we see a higher percentage of students. Well, I just know from being a dean, we do have a large percentage of our students who are dealing with learning challenges and learning disabilities, and so we do a lot with accommodations at the community college level. So definitely have that experience there. Personally, I was diagnosed in first grade, kindergarten, something like that, being ADHD. That was a fun experience. And I got all three. Yay. So couldn't sit in my chair, wouldn't stop vocalizing. Because I wouldn't say talking, it's vocalizing, because for me, my friends go, yes, if you hear an annoying sound, Chris will echo it. If I'm not, especially when I'm tired or whatever, that's there. Did a lot of the medical and behavioral stuff to try to control a lot of this stuff. But still, it's a daily struggle that you run into. And I like, the thing for me, another piece that expresses itself is like whenever I have a project like 80% finished, like in my brain, I finished it, but I don't finish it. So I have to constantly try to put reminders or rely on extrinsic motivation to go ahead and complete those projects, because I look at it and I go there. The other thing for me is, unlike Deanna, I can't necessarily maintain eye contact in a busy environment because I'm very driven by visual stimuli. And so I'm always looking around, I'm looking all over the place. And so that's always something that sort of manifests itself. So it's fun. And I make sure I have plenty of toys like a fidget spinner. Yay! These are all fun things that we do to find different ways to engage in things like that. Things that I love, I hyper focus on. I tunnel on what's there, sometimes to my detriment. And those are all things that I have had to deal with through it. But I said it's one of those great things that I'm in a position overseeing areas that I love, so I'm very engaged in what's there. I could also, as a faculty member, a former faculty member, now an administrator, and as an instructor, we see a lot of our students and trying to empathize with the students on some of the different struggles that they have, and so those are all things that is really fun, because it's just one of those things that just sort of runs in that vein. And I agree. I think that there's definitely a lot of folks that exhibit many of the symptoms that we listed earlier. But I think that it is some of these things are just normal. Everyone has these tics. Everyone has these eccentricities. That's one of the good things for me, that I just sort of realized, hey, believe me, I'm the first one to admit I make mistakes, and so I think that's a really valuable asset to have, and being able to move forward with that. So anyone else from our audience would like to talk about their experiences? I know some people have shared in chat already about having family members who work in special education as well as K-12 teaching.
Well, that would be me. Yeah, so I'm on that outside looking in, and so my experiences are quite removed from the actual day-to-day experiences that my son and wife have had over the years, but they are not able to provide names, right, and circumstances. So this is kind of a high level comment, because it would be inappropriate for them, even at home, to mention names and circumstances, right? But my son often asked me when he was first teaching, "Hey, Dad, what was it like when you were in school and you had these children?" I'm like, different lifetime. If there were those children, I don't recall how teachers dealt with it, other than sending them to the principal's office, right? And I attended Catholic schools my whole life, so there was a lot of knuckle beating too. And then the other part of that is, a lot of families were, male work, female home, right? And so, in some circumstances, I think those children were likely homeschooled, and I don't remember. Maybe they were, but I just don't recall a lot of counseling and diagnosis going on when I was, it was just sort of, hey, here's school. Hey, the door's open. Hey, bring your kid. Hey, if there's something going on, he's going to go or she's going to go right to the office. And that was probably about as much diagnosis that was going on, right? I don't know, but I guess I'll summarize by saying it appears from the outside that we have made great strides in not only identifying these types of issues that you've mentioned, Chris, but also providing the necessary resources for families to deal with this, to help not only the A+ students who apparently have no issues, right? But we all have issues. And also deal with every student that's in that classroom in one way or another, right? Every student that comes into that school is important, and it's our job as educators, I believe, to figure out a way to educate all students that come into that building. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
Thank you, Greg. So I've had some people ask me about my background. So squirrels hold a special place in the hearts of various communities. For me, it is one of those things where it's sort of what the name I adopted for the various tics that I have is. It's very similar to like, oh, my mind's wandering, squirrel. Okay, I gotta go back together. I gotta go to my focus. So that's why I have a squirrel in my background. That's there. So that's one of the things that for me is very near and dear to my heart is squirrels, because those are something that I always use to try to get myself to refocus when I realize I'm going down the rabbit hole, or I'm realizing I am going off on a tangent, and I see the bored look creeping into other people's faces, and go, okay, so I spent too much time on this. So this is my mental note to myself. So definitely doing a presentation about this particular condition is something I'm like, yeah, I probably should have a squirrel in the background.
Is that like when you go off track or other people are bored, you visualize the squirrel to like center yourself? Because that sounds like some really good mindfulness. Like just tell everyone, visualize the squirrel.
Or we're just like So the next question we have to sort of guide our discussion is, from your perspective, what excites you about designing courses for or supporting neurodiverse individuals?
Well, I think for me is actually, again, as a student that I was struggling with the traditional classroom, and now my son as well. I think designing courses that are focused on supporting neurodiversity is giving equal learning opportunities. We don't have to go stream changing our curriculum or our modality to a stream. We can actually just make a few adjustments that doesn't only benefit the traditional student, quote unquote traditional student, but also all of the neurodivergent students as well, like my son. Unfortunately, we're not there quite yet. My son has an IEP and he has to be pulled out of classroom every day for 45 minutes to get that one-on-one attention, because how do I put it without sounding mean? Educators don't have the proper training on how to handle students like this. They really don't. And I'm not blaming the teachers or the instructors. I really am not, unless there is pushback from them. But a lot of them actually want to take those steps to make those changes, but they don't know how to do it. And we don't have the support from administration. So for me, that's actually what drives me to want to design courses in a way that they actually meet universal design and that they meet accessibility aspects as well. Because I'm targeting a larger population. I'm not going to say all students because that's impossible, but a larger population more than just the traditional students.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And then also, not only am I convinced that I would be diagnosed with something, I spent so much time in the principal's office in elementary school that I remember one time our principal, King was her last name. She walked into our office looking for something, and I knew where it was before she could figure out where she'd left it. And but I think that was a combination of things. One, I lived in constant fear of missing something, and then I always would. And so it was confirmational. Two, I was learning English at the time. And so not only did I have my brain working a certain way, but then there were things that I would just miss. And what excites me about doing the work for neurodivergent learners is that we would help every student, not just those that are neurodivergent, because as we've said already, there are many who are not diagnosed and many who will not be diagnosed. And I agree with you, Diane. I think that when the teacher does not help your child, then all bets are off, right? I'm more than happy to talk to someone who doesn't know what they're doing and they're overwhelmed, but someone who is overwhelmed and doesn't want to change. That's a different conversation, right? And so the goal is to not just educate our instructors, but then educate the parents and educate the children, so that then it's just a continued learning, so that we continue to evolve. And at no moment do we start to devolve because we've lost momentum.
So, Angelica, I really like what you said for a number of reasons. First one is, to be frank, I got into instructional design by accident. Thank you, Kay. Really appreciate it. And the reason for it is because I wanted to make college suck less for other people than it did for me. And I think, before I always attributed that to, the courses just aren't built well. Like, you can follow this template, you can do this, you can do that. But I think it was, I can now attribute that to the fact that I didn't have any of the supports that I probably needed to learn appropriately and kind of be on par with my peers. And the second reason, or the second thing that I'm excited about, so the first one is I get the opportunity to make things better. We'll say, I'll be nicer about it the second time. The other reason is because, and to take from, UDL, I think that when you provide those supports for, anybody who is neurodivergent in a course, you make that course better for those people who haven't identified, but also generally for everyone else. And, for instance, we always have that boilerplate of, if you need an accommodation, go here, talk to them. Well, you have to have a complete diagnosis, and my ASD was not diagnosed until late in life. I read through my childhood medical records and went, how did nobody see this when I was younger? Like, how did nobody address this? And I can only find one person that was willing to see me, one clinician who was willing to even talk to me about it. So that's a struggle for a lot of people. But looking at things like, hey, if you're struggling with the reading, I threw a link in chat like way earlier about, there's a voiceover feature for Kindle Paperwhites or the Kindle app on your phone. Is it as good as an audiobook? No. But it's something that has helped me in the past. And it's something that now that I want to do a PhD at some point, I really would put in an accommodation for DRM-free PDFs of the ebooks, because I can throw those into anything, into my Kindle, into an app that will literally read and highlight as it's going along. I can speed those up so that I'm not spending 15 hours on something that should take 2 or 3. So what excites me about designing courses, it's the ability to bring anyone who is neurodiverse into the fold, to show them examples about what are appropriate accommodations for that, and to understand that because everyone is so different, may not want to, identify themselves, make them understand that this is it's not a disability. It's a difference in how you learn, how you take in information, and that's okay. It should be respected rather than feared or even looked down upon, which I think has been, kind of that popular notion for a long time.
Yeah, I love what you said. And Greta Thunberg, she's, I was looking up exactly, she's an environmentalist. She's very young still, I think. Anyway, one of the things I love about her is that she says that her disability is her superpower. And I do agree, because I have that ability to focus and get things done. And when I need to just go, I go, and I can block everything out. And I know myself enough to lock myself away so that I don't have to mask, and I don't have to pretend that everything's okay when someone interrupts me. But yeah, I think these are superpowers, and I've seen them in my family and friends, that they are able to do things that the neurotypical brain can't, or struggles to do, or whatever. And so, yeah, I think it can be seen as something positive instead of negative.
I don't know if you all have noticed this, like we have at CSU, but and I don't know when this changed, and there's change still happening, but it used to really be kind of a struggle when we talked about these topics with faculty. They would just bop their head right and go, "What, another thing to deal with? Like, I don't have enough. I'm on committees. I'm doing this, blah blah blah." Right? And now you're going to give me this story as well. But that seems to have really not totally gone away. But I think with these kind of conversations, with the visibility that's been given to these types of topics, that's not so much a battle anymore as a mutual need to be educated and figure out ways to accommodate all students. And so, used to be, and I'm not exaggerating. It used to be I'd go into a little office to meet with the faculty, and they would throw their 75 slides on the table and say, "I don't know. There's my course. What else do you need from me?" Uh, Fortunately, that scenario has gone almost completely away, but now they're more interested in conversations about these topics. And again, a lot more resources available, not only for the student, but for faculty as well to help students. And there is. I don't want to turn this into a crude financial discussion, but CSU and CU, I know for sure, are really driving the retention of students and the graduation rate for students. And I think what we do with respect to the content that's developed for online courses, the ability to reach all students, contributes to that retention and graduation rate. I don't know what percentage, but I firmly believe there is a contribution being made there too.
Brandon, you have your hand up.
And that's also the not paying attention to being muted portion of things. So I want to give Deanna a chance to say something. I don't want to, bogart our conversation, but Greg brought up something really good, which is there are things changing in higher education, and I think part of that is the acceptance of these cognitive differences. And not only have I seen less of a battle, but I have also seen people who are enthusiastic about creating good learning experiences and pushing forward what they already have. And I think that's exciting to work with those people as well. So that's my short and sweet piece.
And yeah, for me, what excites me is very similar. For me, how much technology we have now than in the past, where a lot of students are now able to customize the course materials to a way that fits them, whether it is switching from a high contrast to low contrast. You can play around with your settings an awful lot. You can go ahead. A lot of the annotation technology that's gone out there now is really, really helpful. Yes, dark mode for the win. Every time you turn on dark mode, you're like, I am Batman. But the thing is that that really excites me is that the ability to customize solutions that work for you. And so those are always things that I'm really excited about using those tools. I think the other thing that's out there is that, as we talked about before, there's a greater awareness and there's a greater acceptance. I think that's one of the other pieces that I've noticed in my time. I know whenever I was growing up, it was not accepted. I know, some people have talked about it being a negative or a detrimental diagnosis. That's basically my experience in grade school. It was not a supportive environment. It was, this is what we have. You have a hard copy book and that's it. And exactly what we talked about before, like what Greg talked about, is this, the teachers had their slides and their overhead projectors, their transparencies, and that's it. That's what they worked off of, and they did nothing else besides that. So, I mean, that's the thing that excites me, is that there's so many people who are willing to work with our students and support our students. And so that's one of the things that really excites me about designing these courses, is being able to try to start, how do we start leveraging that, and then working with my faculty, working with my staff to go like, how can we leverage this? How can we identify additional resources, and then let students sort out what works for them and what doesn't? Give everyone the opportunity, because as we talked about, as others have talked about, it's not just for one group. There's lots of people who love transcripts, as opposed to, they have no issue with their site, but they love transcripts because they can read through a transcript faster than they can watch a video. And so, like, there's lots of different accessibility pieces that are out there that are used by many, many folks. All right, a third question is, from your perspective, what worries you about designing courses for supporting neurodiverse individuals?
I think we have been like touching that in the previous question anyway, is the pushback that we have from instructors, from faculty. I mean, just like we have very supportive faculty that are on board about making the changes, we also have the other side of people is, I already have enough. I'm developing content, I'm teaching. Why are you adding this on my plate? It shouldn't be my responsibility. Unfortunately, I have had experiences where instructors have told me, if this person has X or Y or Z disability, they should drop my class. They're not going to succeed. Like, on my face, literally, they have told me that, which is heartbreaking, because my brain immediately goes to, is this going to be the experience that my kid is going to have? The other frustration part, at least in K-12, and this comes from me being a mom, is that the school districts in Colorado, at least, a lot of time refuse to test students. They just say, no, he'll outgrow it. They will outgrow it. Don't worry. This is part of, the process. Yada, yada. I was like, no, I have this. I recognize the patterns. With my son, it was a 2-year battle. He did not get the testing from the school district, even though they get the funding for it. I had to pocket that out. And that's why a lot of students are not diagnosed, because number one, the schools don't want to do it, don't want to deal with it. Number two, is awfully expensive. It's between $3,000 to $7,000 to actually get a proper diagnosis. Once I had it, though, and I gave it to the school, they had to run their own diagnosis. They will not take the one from the hospital, even though it was 2 days, 7 hours. My kid was, test by test by test. So that's another discouraging thing, that if the student might be struggling with learning, but they don't have a diagnosis, they cannot get the proper accommodation because they don't have the diagnosis. We have the pushback from instructors and faculty, and we do not have the support from higher administration either. There is no funding, there is not enough interest. Like, this cannot be mandatory because it breaks into the academic freedom. So all of that it's worrisome and frustrating beyond words, even though it's a federal law. So that's my takeaway before I get to heat it up.
One thing.
Come on, Deanna, let it fly.
So for one thing I will say is, when I hear faculty or instructors say, I can't take one more thing on. It's really, they're overwhelmed. And a lot of it just comes from a place of fatigue, from a place of stress and burnout. And it can be difficult. And I think that I put in the chat the link to accessibility law for Colorado state and local government. And as you said, Diana, it is the law. But one of the things that is on their website too is progress, not perfection. And so when we tell our instructors, faculty, teachers, you need to help my student because it's the law, they also have to remember that it's one step at a time, and that if you're only focused on one thing at a time, it's less overwhelming, especially when we're talking to faculty and instructors who themselves are need accessibility. And so they're struggling because they need the accessibility, but they're learning the accessibility, and it really complicates things so much. But I think one of the things that worries me about it is similar to what you're saying, is pushback and saying no. But actually, one of the things that I was thinking about was I've done enough. It's enough. And that concerns me. I've been making my classes accessible using Yuja Panorama, and it's very helpful, but it is frustrating when you've run the document and you've done the thing and all of that, and it's still telling you it's 80%. And you're like, what am I missing? And it's been a process, and my documents are coming back now 98, 99% accessible, but it took me a moment to get there. So there's a part of me that absolutely empathizes with individuals that are pushing back. And I would like to give everyone the benefit of the doubt and say it's not from a lack of caring, but it's more about self-preservation.
Yeah, sort of what folks have said. For me, a worry also is, will there be enough funding for the work as we go ahead and move forward? As everyone knows, higher education has been more dependent upon student tuition dollars instead of actual aid and funding from our states and federal government. That's always going to be a challenge. I think the other piece that I worry about is in an effort to try to serve folks as efficiently as possible. We start ending up with these silver bullet pieces. Like one of my things I talked about earlier was like the extra time or time and a half accommodation that is very prevalent for those of you that are teaching. I'm sure you remember seeing a ton of these accommodations are used for a lot of different things. Like I said, that might work for some people. It does not work for everyone that's out there. So my worry is that we're forced into an area where students can't have that choice and can't have that. Would be limit customization, and students have to go on and try to find things on their own, as opposed to us vetting things and making sure we're picking effective technology. It's more of we're leaving the students try to find their own things to support their needs. I think the other piece to it is just sort of one of the pieces that's there is thinking that once we have a solution, then that's it. No need anything else. Yep, that's it. This thing worked for 15% or 20% of our people, so that's all we need to do. So like that's the other thing about it, is thinking that that everything's fixed, because that's one of the things I struggle with on my own end, is that something like ADHD is something you have for the rest of your life. And sometimes it'll go in certain pieces will go into remission, and other times it'll come back out in force. And so it's one of those things where it's a never ending challenge to try to rein in the squirrels, as it were, to keep them focused and keep you moving forward. So that's one of the things that is always there. It's also one of the reasons why when you look at statistically, we talked about earlier about anxiety, depression, self-esteem issues. Those are all things that are very commonplace because you have so many failures. I feel like I'm playing baseball every day. It's like, okay, if I can avoid 3 out of 10 squirrels, hey, I batted at 300 that day, and that's awesome. But those are one of the things that you always run into, is just as we're putting more and more stuff out there, as our lives get busier and busier with technology, with social media, with everything else that's going out there, there's so many additional distractions that you can spend so much time doom scrolling, which is a fun pastime. But the thing is that that's really, really enticing and engaging for folks that have inattention, because everything is short, everything is quick. You get your quick fix, boom, move on to the next one, move on to the next one, move on. And it's a never-ending stream of stimuli. And the problem is, how do you break that whenever your brain is already wired in that way? Where you're like, I like that really quick stimuli, but the thing is like, okay, trying to set alarms, trying to set things like that doesn't always work. So like, those are the things is that it's always the challenge of how do you consistently fight the squirrels every day. Is always a worry. With that, I think we'll go ahead and move to the fourth question, which is, drumroll. From your perspective, what more is needed when it comes to designing courses for or supporting neurodiverse individuals? So this is your chance to articulate and advocate what more needs to be done. So if you're in charge of all the pocketbooks, what would you do? Is a way to think about this question.
Unlimited funding. No, just kidding. In a perfect world, I think for me, one of the challenges with any kind of support for design changes, faculty training, anything like that is simple, specific, easy strategies that people can take. That idea of iterative design, right? We're not looking good faith effort. We're not looking to pile all of this on you. We understand that you're learning, but here are a few things that you could do. And I know that we've been talking about kind of in general and broad terms, but when you get down to the nitty gritty, I think that a lot of faculty and even instructional designers don't know how to approach what we're talking about. And so that would be my thought is people love checklists. People love infographics. People love stuff like that they can get at a glance. They can read while they're eating their lunch. The small amount of personal time they have. And I'm not sure that we do a good job of chunking accessibility or inclusiveness. It's like just this big, momentous monstrosity that faculty need to tackle. And I think that's tough to swallow for a lot of people, which may lead to some of that reticence.
I think education is what we need. I really do. I think education, and then as Diana had put on the chat, support from those who are in charge of the funding, but also just in charge of like giving us time, because we can't just expect people to do this if they don't have the time. And there needs to be time granted until we're all a little bit more educated, and then it becomes about just staying on top of things versus learning everything, we say to our college students, 3 credit hours is more or less about 6 hours of studying outside of the classroom. And for some of our instructors and faculty, that's exactly what they're doing, but they're not getting those additional hours to learn. And it is a learning process. So especially for instructors, I think instructors should be compensated for the work that they're doing outside of the classroom in terms of that learning for them. Or release time, whichever one you want to call it, compensation, release time. Yeah, it's a tough time to be an educator, because there are things that, we are content experts, but the teaching piece is challenging. But we are at the community college because we love what we do. Well, I love what I do and I want to serve my students well. And it's hard to do that when I have the desire, but not the time to learn everything that I need to learn. So it's a conundrum. We're in a pickle, people.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in, and I'm taking this from a learning design perspective, and for the learning design team at Front Range, I think we have this mindset when it comes to learning design, and especially online classes. You do everything up front, and everything's taken care of at the at the beginning, right? Yeah, exactly. Brandon's washing his hands of it, like and we're done. I think that our learning design team and everybody who starts seeing a problem, send an email to the learning design team. We'll help you work through it as it's happening. So more of a rapid response thing instead of going, I did universal design, everything's fixed, everything is fixed, and we'll just move forward. I think that learning designers have to be involved in places other than just at the beginning or at the end for a review for the next redesign. I think it is jumping and talking to your learning designers as these problems happen.
Yeah, and I think some of it too is the misconception, because I work with part-time instructors. I have the opportunity to mentor and then also coach. And one of the things that I've told, especially some of the new instructors, is I give you permission to not have everything done. All you need to have are the first 2 weeks at the start of the semester, and then stay appropriately ahead of your students. But then that gives you time to build it. And I've been really impressed by the fact that some of the instructors have taken me up on that. And it just, you can see them going like, really? And then body language sort of shifts and like, okay, so we do see it, at least at Front Range, but I don't know that they hear it. It's this like self-imposed pressure to have it all, to be done.
No, I agree with what Kay say. A lot of the modality, unfortunately, that the university has is, let's develop the online courses, have them ready before the semester starts, and then after that you're on your own because we need to jump into the next development for the next semester. And it's like, no, they need the support throughout the semester. We cannot expect the instructors to be a know-it-all. Yeah, they're subject matter experts in whatever they're teaching, but as an instructional designer, as learning designer, technologies, we're supposed to be the support system, not only for the LMS, but also for all of the teaching modalities as well, and all of the learning, the different learning that the students might have. But unfortunately, that's what we see a lot at CU is, let's help them develop, run that through QM if we actually do QM. Sometimes we haven't done that in a while, and bye. See you next time that you have a new course. Yes, QM does look. I'm not a fan of that.
Plug for Oscar. It's open source.
Yep. Like with QM or some of the other certifications, there is a fee to get certified, and that fee sometimes becomes a barrier to update courses or different things like that because you have to recertify the course anytime you make changes. So those are all pieces. For me, I think it sort of goes back to what Angelica was talking about, which was as institutions and as educators, we need to stop spreading ourselves super thin. I think that's one of the things we really need to do is because as a community college, we serve 100% of our applicants, and we meet our students where they're at, and that is what we do. That's our mission. I think one of the challenges we have is we have so many demands coming to us from our communities, from our stakeholders, from our rights holding groups, that it's very difficult to sort of find alignment or find other pieces that are there. So I think that's one of the things that we need to do a better job at is figuring out how we want to serve our community and best serves our community. And then I think that might help reduce some of the load on everybody. I think the other piece to it is having options. I think it's one of the things that we do get locked in with instructors is that sometimes we don't consider other ways to assess a student. It's always it's one of those sacred cow moments where, well, this has always been done by a written exam or a written paper, as opposed to a presentation, as opposed to a podcast, as opposed to some other form of communication, unless it's dictated by our core competencies for the course. I think that's one of the things that we always need to always have a reminder for folks, is that there's more than one way to assess mastery or competency in a subject. And it's always giving the students that freedom of expression when it comes to using those universal design principles and guidelines. So we'll go ahead and move into our last question, which is, from your perspective, what solutions have worked for you when it comes to designing courses or for or supporting neurodiverse individuals? So this is what works for you. And like I said, we can be super quick about it if we want. And if the answer is nothing, then just say nothing is working. But if something has been working for you, feel free to go ahead and share that.
For me, especially that happened actually when I was at Front Range, I designed a training that is called Step Into My Shoes. And it's just giving instructors, faculty, and staff just a taste of how neurodivergent students experience an online course. I have an example of for visually impaired, hearing impaired, for dyslexic, and for color blindness, and I actually make them experience with simulations how the students actually experience that if they don't take the proper steps to address those issues. So that has been great, because like when I did that, a lot of the people that participated was like, oh wow, this is a big eye-opening. I want to learn now. So it was just kind of like humanizing the situation in a way that is just not, oh, this is mandatory, this is a law, because when you say that, there is a wall immediately put in front of you. Like they, for some reason, they don't like it. Like the words that this is a law, or you need to do that, or you have to do that, that is a strong language for a lot of faculty, and they don't like that. But once you actually humanize it and like put the example and make them experience it, they're like, oh, okay, teach me how to fix this issue. So that has been a great example for me. Unfortunately, I have not been able to like do that training quite often since I left Front Range, because it needs to be kind of in person. But I'm hoping to like get to do it again.
Yeah, I think as an instructional coach, it's just telling people one thing at a time. The whole thing doesn't need to be renovated, doesn't need to change, and then also being there to support, which is why I have gone in, and just try to learn as much as I can, so that if I need to support someone, I can guide them along, and in some cases, even just making the changes for them with the intent to teach later. But sometimes people are just so overwhelmed, they just need someone else to do it. And so, but I think it's just, for me, it's one thing, pick one thing that is really important, and understand that even though you're frustrated, it's really in our students' best interest. And we want everyone to learn, because you never know who is going to be the next person who cures cancer. And maybe they couldn't get there because they couldn't figure out the learning thing. But once we make our design appropriate, all of a sudden we have people contributing in the best possible way.
Thank you. Like for me, I think that what works is like I echo what everyone else is saying, is having the step-by-step process, looking at constantly evaluating, making sure we actually close the loop is also something else also is very effective. So like we implement these strategies, but a lot of times we lack the time, the resources, or the motivation to do that evaluation process and go, did that change actually make a difference? And I think that's one of the things, is closing that feedback loop. I think the other piece that works out really well is getting students involved. We've done that on advisory boards at my institution. So those are some things that I think is another great way to sort of start opening people's minds as far as what your students are struggling with, or what folks are working with, and whether their obstacles and their barriers are. And it's also a great way, because a lot of students will go, this is what you guys do good, but then this is where the wheels fall off. And so like those are one of the things that I think is definitely a really good solution is getting more people involved to have those conversations, to do those focus that work with students, as well as getting everyone in your organization work together. I think that's always one of the challenges is that sometimes there's always like a separation or a silo effect, and it's like no, we're all working, to echo Angelica's point, is that we're all working together for student success, and so that's one of the things I think has been a good solution. And so we'll move into the last section, which is resources.
So this is the neurodivergent course that I am offering at Front Range Community College. I think it's a course that could be easily duplicated for other institutions, and I'm always more than happy to share what I have. It's a self-paced workshop, but faculty and instructors do have within like a 10-week period, they have to finish those things. And yeah, those workshops seem to work well for busy people.
Yeah, I just put up some of the other workshops here that were offered by the Teaching Excellence Center at FRCC.
Yep.
They're out there. So if you're an FRCC member, please feel free to take care of it. If you're not an FRCC member, I'm sure you probably have additional courses at your own college that you can always talk to your teaching learning center or your program chair or your dean and ask about professional development opportunities that are there. Definitely professional development is a good place to go. To look for these type of resources and materials. So definitely looking close to home is something that's always good. There's always a lot of free webinars that are out there as well that you can look for. And speaking of conferences, Kay, do you want to talk about this slide?
Sure, I'll just jump onto this. As you might have seen, a lot of our learning designers came from all over Colorado to come and talk at this. We are having the e-learning consortium of Colorado. We are having an online virtual conference April 9th and 10th, and we have a neurodiverse learning track because our members wanted this. So that's about all I have to say there.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending. I know some people had to drop out because we went a little over what we thought we would, but great discussion. Wonderful getting to chat with everybody, and everyone have a wonderful day.
Our theme music is Kung Fu Glitch by CDK, licensed by Creative Commons BY 3.0.